Welcome back to The Power of Words. In this episode, we go deeper because we discovered that the way that we speak about ourselves is not just a habit. It's something that can shape how we feel, how we react, and even how we experience life. And what if I told you right now that our words don't just influence our thoughts? What if I tell you that they can actually change your brain? Before we go further, subscribe on the channel and leave your reactions in the comments. I'm very curious about what you think of my content. Love to listen and to read all of your reactions. I always answer, so let me know. So, back to the subject. What's really happening inside our brain when we are repeating certain words or thoughts? Powerful, sorry. Science gives us a powerful insight here. It gives us the insight that our brain is not fixed. It's constantly busy with adapting based on what we think, based on what we feel, on what we repeat. This process means that every thought we return to is strengthening some kind of pathway in our brain. Let's take a closer look at how this works. I'll take you with me. What the science says about words. So, modern neuroscience is beginning to explain something that ancient traditions and our ancestors seemed to understand intuitively long ago. Our human brain responds very strongly to language. One fascinating discovery, or I think it's a fascinating discovery, comes from research on emotional labeling. Um, it's when people put their feelings into words, activity in our amygdala, that's the part that's associated with fear and stress, begins to decrease. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex becomes more active, and this area of the brain helps us regulate emotions and create rational perspective. So, in a more simpler words, what does the process of emotional labeling actually means? It means putting our feelings into words. Because when we say things like, I feel anxious or I feel overwhelmed, something very powerful happens in our brain. And I talked about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. So, for a little reminder, the amygdala, which is responsible for fear and stress, begins to decrease, and the prefrontal cortex becomes more active, which helps us regulate emotions and see clarity. So, instead of being controlled by our feelings, we begin to understand them. In other words, when we give our emotions a name, we take back control. And it all starts with words. So, naming what we feel helps calm our brain. Words create structure, they organize emotional experiences. And this is one of the reasons why therapy, journaling, and storytelling can be so powerful. And language allows the brain to process experiences that might otherwise remain chaotic. Let me know in the comments what is your go to. I love to journal, and I also love to, sorry, I also love to sing as a way of using my words to change my reality. And if you already knew about this, and if you're in one way or another, perhaps unconsciously, are implementing that in your own life, then please let me know. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. What happens when our emotions, the emotions that we're feeling, are going much deeper than the moment? Because I can recall that I used to get so angry or so agitated or so like depressive. It wasn't, a lot of the time, it wasn't rational um, for the situation that I was in, but still I reacted like over dramatic, like quote unquote, right? That's not just stress or overwhelm. That's something older. That was something stored. Because sometimes what we feel isn't just about now, it is connected to past experiences, to wounds, to trauma. And here's where it becomes even more important to put those feelings into words. Because when emotions stay unnamed, they don't disappear. They stay in the body, they stay in the nervous system, they stay in the dark, luring, lurking, and watching. They still there, waiting to be understood. I noticed when I began to name them slowly and safely. I created space for something else, for processing, for release, for healing. Trauma often exists in a space where words are difficult. And the trauma can rechange our memories. It can reshape our memories. It can leave parts of the memories out of it. So, memories may feel fragmented, they are scattered in different parts. Emotions may appear overwhelming or confusing, and it's not that it isn't overwhelming and confusing, but for me, myself, uh, I know that I've had many reactions that were out of proportion in equation to the situation that's it's triggered. So actually it was quote unquote over dramatic, but still it was real, right? Because I felt it and it was really that deep for me. And if you recognize this, then I want to invite you to subscribe on my channel because I'm talking about my recovery in that because it's very exhausting to to have intense reactions like that. So, trauma can be hard to put into words. Memories may feel fragmented. That means that they may feel unclear. Our brain stores traumatic experiences differently from normal memories. Instead of being organized into a clear narrative, trauma can remain stored in sensory fragments. Instead of a clear story, it can feel like loose pieces. Images, sensations, feelings, emotions. But when we begin putting those experiences into words, something shifts. Then something starts to change. Language allows our brain to organize our experiences into a story. And those words help the brain turn those pieces, those loose pieces, into one complete story. And the story is easier to understand for our brain than scattered pieces, fragments, you call it. This is why therapeutic practices often involve speaking about painful events. And that's why talking about what you've been through can help. Not because it removes the pain, but because it gives the pain meaning. Because language transforms chaos into meaning. And meaning is where healing is allowed to begin. And as we begin to name our personal pain, something else starts to emerge. Because I started to realize that pain, not all pain is individual. There are emotions, some emotions we carry that didn't start with us. They are shared, passed down, felt across communities, across generations. This is this is the meaning behind collective trauma. It's the grief, it's the fear, it's the silence that lives not just within one person, but within many, in a bloodline, in the DNA. And just like personal emotions, collective trauma also seeks expression, because what remains unnamed remains unprocessed. And when we begin to give it language, when we begin to give it words, then we acknowledge it. Together, we create a possibility for collective healing. So, what does it mean to name something that is shared by many? Collective trauma is not always loud. Sometimes it lives in silence, in what isn't said because of fear, because of suppression, in what is avoided because of the coping behind it, and what entire groups of people have learned to carry quietly. And this part is especially very important for me to highlight very boldly. Even if we didn't live the original events, we can still feel its echo. War, colonization, violence, slavery, poverty, that are experiences that leave psychological marks that extend beyond the original events. Even in our body, in our reactions, in the stories we never told, but somehow still learned. It's even proven that trauma can literally change DNA over time when it's evolving. It's very interesting. And maybe I can do another episode, like a different episode on it, because yeah, let me know if you want it, by the way, in the reactions. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button also. But what I was saying, this is the nature of collective trauma. Collective trauma moves through families, it moves through cultures, it moves through time. And just the same as personal trauma, the only thing that the collective trauma is seeking is recognition, acknowledgement, and loudness, basically. Because what stays unspoken stays unresolved. But when we begin to name it, and when we start to say, yeah, this happened, this mattered, and yeah, this affected us, there you there we are creating space for acknowledgement, for connection, for understanding that we are not alone in what we carry, because we are all suffering from one thing or the other. Not in the same way, but we are still suffering. So be nice to each other, please. Yes? Thank you. And in that shared naming, there is the beginning of healing. And not just for one person, but for many, because collective trauma also means collective healing. And let's go for a minute to the words that are spoken. Because even in the words that are spoken, the stories that were passed down, beliefs about safety, trust, and belongings are inherited. This also is a part of collective trauma. And language, again, plays a powerful role in how that trauma is spreading. The stories that communities tell about themselves, those stories influence their identity. They shape expectations about the future. But there's another side of the coin, and that's that language also offers something hopeful. Because just as harmful narratives can pass across generations, new narratives can also be created. Communities can redefine themselves. We can reshape our own individual identity. And I always I always said to myself, if I can talk myself down, I can talk myself up again, and I bloody did it. I did it. I am very proud, and I did it. And That transformation began with something that was deceptively easy and simple, basically. Changing the story, not deceptively easy as in it was an easy road, but easy as in like duh. What about the things that were shared? Because even when something is shared, collective is still carried by many. It is still experienced within ourselves as individual person. It's in our body, it's in our thoughts, it's in the way that we speak about ourselves when no one else is listening. Because it doesn't matter where the pain comes from. Our brain always responds to one thing in the present moment. And that's our internal language, the words that we speak to ourselves, the words that we repeat, the meaning that we give to our experiences, the quiet sentences running in the background of our minds. And here's what's important. Our brain doesn't separate past from present as easy as you might think. We can do that with our minds, but our brain sees that differently because our brain only responds to what we tell ourselves now. I think one of the most fascinating discoveries in neuroscience is that the brain often responds to imagined experiences almost as strongly as real experiences. And this includes, again, language. When we speak words out loud, our brain activates regions in our in our brain that are responsible for sound, meaning, and emotion. And here is what is interesting. Many of those same areas also activate when we speak silently inside our own mind. In other words, our brain listens to our internal voice almost as seriously as our spoken words. And that means that the sentences that we tell ourselves daily, that we repeat to ourselves daily, are not just background noise. They are signals, they are instructions, they are shaping the way our brain sees reality. And every time we repeat a thought, our brain strengthens neural pathways. So every time that the thought we have is repeated, the pattern becomes strengthened by our brain. You have to look at it like creating a path. The more you walk it, the easier it becomes to follow. And over time, these repeated thoughts build stronger neural connections. It's called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change through repeated experience. So the words that we are repeating daily inside ourselves, towards ourselves, they are not harmless. They are literally shaping the structure of our brain and the reality we experience because of it. Which means that the words that we say to ourselves, the words that we speak about ourselves, and the words that we think are literally shaping the structure of our life. So, when you hear me say the power of words, I'm not just talking about language. I'm talking about our brain, about how it adapts, how it learns, and how it is constantly shaped by what we repeat. Every thought that we return to, every sentence that we tell ourselves, that is leaving a trace. And over time, those traces become patterns. Patterns that influence how we feel, how we see ourselves, and how we move through the world. But I think the most important part is this: those patterns are not fixed. People often talk about that they're unlucky, but I think the most important part of being unlucky is being unaware. Those patterns can change. You can change them. We can change them. And yes, it is one thought at a time, one word at a time, and one like insight at a time. But that is where real power begins. You're literally raising your frequency in that point. In the next part, we'll explore why language became so important to us as humans and how it connects us to each other. Thank you for listening. Remember, frequency is power. Bye.